Our next speaker, I'm going to take her out of order because she's got a time issue. I remember back in 1977, I was just a young budding lad back then, when Barbara Anderson started Citizens for Limited Taxation. Does everybody remember that? What a huge difference that made here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, didn't it? Barbara is now the executive director of Citizens for Limited Taxation. She attended Penn State University. Early on, she had been a lifeguard and a swimming instructor. She's been in Massachusetts since 1971, and she currently lives in Marblehead. She started with Citizens for Limited Taxation as a back in 1977, and I remember that. Because my friend from Methuen worked with, I won't mention his name, but my friend from Methuen worked with her at that time. And that's how I ended up meeting her. She helped to gather 4,800 signatures on a petition in this state to limit our taxes, and then became an administrative assistant for CLT. And from 1980 on, she has been the executive director. She's been a columnist, formerly for the Patriot Ledger, not to be confused with the Valley Patriot, we're a real newspaper. And she's now a weekly columnist for the Salem News Eagle, really? Eagle Tribune Broadcasting? The Salem News Eagle Tribune News Group. She also co-hosted programs with Jerry Williams and Howie Carr in the 1980s and the 1990s. She's been on commissions for Governor King, Governor Weld, Cellucci, on government restructuring, funding, fiscal policy. She's on the board of directors for the National Taxpayers Union, and in 1999 she was the recipient of the 4th Lifetime Tax Fighter Award from the Howard Jarvis Taxpayer Association. Someone who really does a lot of stuff and really does go out and do the work, Barbara Anderson.
Thank you very much. I'm glad we went back into the past there for a little while. First of all, it reminds everybody that I'm old enough to know what I'm doing. And it's because some of you are too young to remember, and therefore might be getting discouraged at the way things are going now. And I think we might as well talk a little bit about reality here. I know we have to do the rah-rah and we have to do the education, but the truth is, a lot of people who were members of the Tea Party and who came to these big rallies aren't here today. And I think a lot of them are discouraged, or they're so afraid that they just want to think about something else, and so they aren't here with us. And we have to get those people back. And one way to do that is to remind people that it's important to remember that when times are like these, there have always been times like these. I remember 1980, right after I'd gone to work for Citizens for Limited Taxation, Jimmy Carter years, double-digit inflation, interest rates, misery index, gas prices out of control. And some people, I'm not going to name names, but I know one woman who was keeping SpaghettiOs under the bed so she could feed her teenage son when the whole system collapsed. That was the mindset back then, and I know it sounds familiar to people perhaps today. When we moved from Danvers to Marblehead, it was very hard to move all those cans of SpaghettiOs, which we eventually ate. But in 1980, when things were at their worst and everyone was thinking it was pretty much the end of America as we know it, in November 4th, 1982, things happened. Governor Reagan, Ronald Reagan, became the President of the United States. And that same night, we were down the street at one of the hotels waiting for the returns to come in on Proposition 2.5. At that time, property taxes in Massachusetts were the highest in the world. And on November 4th, Ronald Reagan won, we won, everything turned around. The next few years were years of prosperity and tax limitation and power to the people. And everyone forgot about the misery index of 1979. That was one of the most exciting evenings of my political life. The next most exciting event of my political life happened in 2007-8. Again, things were looking bad, things are starting to fall apart, and this thing called the Tea Party came along. Now, under the layers I've been trying to keep warm in is my original Tea Party t-shirt that I got on one of the earliest events that I wear a lot. And I thought, well, we at Citizens for Limited Taxation, we were aware of the Tea Party because we've been Tea Partiers since the beginning. We used to go down to the harbor with a whole bunch of different people every year. Newt Gingrich was there with us one year. Grover Norquist from Americans for Tax Return. We all were down there throwing the tea in the harbor. Bill Weld, Paul Salucci. Everyone was always down there throwing tea into the harbor. Thank heavens that got old. We're not doing that today. But the concept was there for us all along. We were Tea Partiers back then. But by the early 2000s, it was getting pretty lonely out there as taxpayer activists. And suddenly the Tea Party came along. And I don't know what you all like to call yourselves, patriots, constitutionalists. We called you reinforcements. It was like being at the Alamo. And you know what it was like at the Alamo, and help wasn't coming, and Davy Crockett, they were all gonna die. But just imagine if someone up in the fort had said, look, here comes the Tea Party. And that's how we felt, finding reinforcements, and it was so exciting for a few years. And the Tea Party was there to fight with us and for us, and we are very grateful to all of you, even those of you who just became active in politics at that time. There are a lot of people here who are Citizens for Limited Taxation members, and you know everything you need to know about politics, but the Tea Party was there to learn and become part of us, and we are very grateful to that. I'm not here really so much to give information about taxes. The one wonderful thing about Citizens for Limited Taxation, as opposed to, say, the Republican Party, is we are unified on our issue. Every single member of Citizens for Limited Taxation believes in limited taxation. Otherwise, why would they join us? All the Republicans I know believe in limited taxation. Every Tea Partier I know believes in limited taxation. We don't fight among ourselves about our issue because our issue is a solid center for everything that everyone else is doing. Because while taxes are a problem, monetarily problem, and money that we don't get to spend ourselves, the real thing about taxes, as other speakers have said here today, is taxes are the power that make government big. And the bigger they get, the more of a problem they are for us. So we limit taxes not so much to keep our own money, but to keep them from getting too much power. And the only thing you have to remember about taxes, the latest information, which I made sure I got for you today, that just comes out in April from the Tax Foundation, is that we have the 5th highest per capita tax burden in the country. So no matter what you hear about how we're not doing this, and we need more money for that, we need a gas tax increase, we need this, we have the 5th highest per capita tax burden in the United States of America. So we have plenty of money. That isn't our problem. We all know what our problem is. It's a governor who doesn't know how to manage any state agency, and legislature, of course, that thinks it doesn't have to debate welfare reform in the middle of the budget debates. So we know what the problems are. Now that I've gotten out the information, and then you need anything else about taxes, go to our website, Citizens for Limited Taxation, just Google it, and you can catch up on anything that's going on in the state relative to taxes, and everything's relative to taxes. But I think my being the keynote speaker means that I'm supposed to go a little farther than just using my issue, explaining my issue, making sure everybody here is reminded of what's going on, and doing the rah-rah and the optimism, and someday things are going to get better. I think I have to have a plan. I think that's why I'm here. I think I'm supposed to have a plan. And I do. And I want everyone from all these different groups that have been speaking today to focus on this, because it's a plan for all of us. It's called the undecided voter. Now, I've been paying close attention to what's been going on the last couple of years, saying what's different now, what really isn't working. That worked for us back with Prop 2.5 and in 2000 when we did the income tax rollback. What worked for us is people were paying attention. Back in 1980, when we did Proposition 2.5, there was conservative talk radio from early in the morning till late at night and on weekends. There were 4 major talk radio stations in Boston, statewide stations. Almost every community our little series of communities had their own radio station, and all of those would have a talk show every now and then. I used to do them. I'd go all over the state doing talk radio. Newspapers back then were big and carried our issues. If we were doing something, any of us doing something, there'd be pages of information about it. When we did Prop 2.5, the Globe ran a story every day for 2 weeks on different sections of 2.5, analyzing it, giving the pros and the cons. Now when you do a ballot question, you're lucky they mention you're out there getting signatures. People aren't paying attention. They aren't reading the newspapers. They aren't watching one of the 4 television stations we had back then. When I used to do a television interview, I'd maybe have 4 or 5 minutes on a 10-minute segment. Now if you see me on television, you will hear me say 20 words in a segment that is 30 seconds. And while we're speaking, at the bottom of the television screen, they're running, I don't know, next day's news or what's coming up on the next show. So the attention is so scattered now, and people don't have time to go to rallies, and they have so many rallies to go to, and there's so much going on that I think that's why people get despair. Even those of us who are activists don't know what to do next. So for this coming election, which has been said before, is the most important in our history since 1980 at least, and maybe even more important because I'm not sure it's going to be that easy to come back as it might have been in the past because of the scattered attention. This election in 2014 and then 2016 is going to decide whether we keep America or not. Now, of course, we're a taxpayer group at the local level, but it's no point in kidding ourselves. If the country doesn't survive, nothing we're going to do for you. So we're very focused, too, on the tax issues nationally and on all the other issues nationally. And we know that we have to win. In 2014, we have to take the U.S. Senate, keep the House. That's what we have to do for all of our issues. And in 2016, we need a president. And how are we going to do this? Here is my plan, and it's 3 words that I want everyone to please remember. The undecided voter. Because all of us, we know so much. And every time we run into an undecided voter, we want him or her to understand everything we know. So we give them the 10 or the 20-minute lecture or speech, the things you've been hearing today. You have to understand all about Common Core. Well, they're not going to stand there for half an hour to understand all about Common Core, or about what the latest tax issues, or the Constitution, or all the things that we know, so we can start right with the middle of the conversation and then go on to our point of view and maybe some little disparities we have here and there. The undecided voter doesn't know anything about anything, and yet he is going to vote. Now, I'm not talking about people who don't vote. If there's one group of people in the country who don't count at all with any of us, it's the non-voter. If they don't vote, if they're apathetic, what do we have to do with them? Do we really want to spend half an hour trying to convince them to vote? This is not the League of Women Voters here. We would rather people didn't vote if they don't know what they're talking about, and most people don't. But if they're going to vote, then they have to know something, understand something about what we're talking about. And I think if they're Americans, and they should be Americans to vote, they have an instinctive understanding of what we're talking about. Some of them are older and they actually learned about the Constitution in school. But Americans, as Americans, genetically understand about freedom. And the fact that they're not hearing that out there in the media and they're not hearing it in school doesn't change the way they are. So they just need us to reach them with a simple message that resonates with what they are, and then we take them to vote the way we want them to vote. So every one of us, when we're talking about our issues or our candidates, have to have in our mind not the other people in our organizations who know everything we know, or other political activists who quickly understand what we know. We have to keep in the back of our minds the undecided voter and keep our message so simple, because you're not going to teach them everything you know. So simple that they will relate to it. And I'm listening to the speeches here today and I'm thinking, okay, take Common Core. I listened to a presentation on Common Core for a couple of hours, at several different places before I understood the problem. And when I understood it, it was perfectly clear to me. And it's one sentence. You're going to turn education over to who? The federal government? The ones who did Obamacare? And that's it. That's all we can really do in the minute we're going to have with that voter. When we did Proposition 2.5, here was the message. Property taxes are too high and we're going to fix them. That's it. I went out there and said that over and over and over again for the 4 months of the campaign. Property taxes are too high and we're going to fix them. When we did the income tax rollback in 2000, we didn't talk about the complexity of the tax code and how it affects the working environment and business and that. All we said was the legislature and governor, last governor, Dukakis, promised that the income tax increase would be temporary. It has been 12 years and we still are paying that income tax. We called our campaign a promise to keep, and that's what we focused on. Focus is what we have to have. We can't educate the entire population. Even back when they were paying attention and we had 3 television stations and 40 different talk shows, we couldn't educate everybody. Certainly can't do it now. We have to find the one sentence, the one thing that resonates with them, that everyone can understand, and go out there and say it. And I think today the Tea Party came up with it. If you like your freedom, you can keep your freedom if you fight for it. Because you notice all the speakers here today, most of them were using some variation on that. If you like your borders, you should keep your borders. And that phrase that comes from the biggest mistake made by President Obama, lying to us about if we could keep our health care, if we liked it, we could keep it. We can all use that over and over again to make our message clear and get all the people in the country who have heard that one message, if you like your health care, you can keep your health care. Get those people to relate that message to what our message is so that they see us all as one unity of somebody who wants to keep America the way America is supposed to be. And the Tea Party is going to lead on that. Citizens for Limited Taxation will be right there, as we always have been, and so will all of your groups and all of you. So thank you very much for coming today.
Thank you, Barbara. How about a little bit more of applause for Barbara? All the years and years and years of hard work. A Tea Party member before there was a Tea Party. Well, the sun has come out, and I think that's pretty appropriate. It's a little nicer than it was earlier. Looks like a few more people have joined us. Welcome.